We have right here an example of an int array. So we're going to do a demo right here with that. So an int array, and it's called numbers is its name. And right then it's just a null pointer, so we don't do anything inside it. Then we're going to initialize numbers, and we're going to say it's a new int array, and we're going to pass it 5 inside the square brackets. And again, notice that because arrays are special, there's no parens to call the constructor. We simply use the square bracket notation to say, how big are you going to be? So arrays, again, like they're a very special component. Now, when I first create that numbers array, we're going to get something that looks something like this. Now, I wrote it horizontally right here, but it could be stored diagonally, vertically. It's not a contiguous chunk of space that we're going to be looking at, but we have references or elements to these spots right here. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice that the last spot right here, index 4, is one less than the size that we tell it that we want it to be, or its length. And so the last index is always going to be length minus 1 when we're talking about an array. And when we create an array, it's initially filled with default values of whatever type you're using to store this. Since I'm using an int, the default value is 0. In fact, all of my primitives, except for Boolean, the default value is 0. If I'm working with Boolean, of course, then it's going to be false, but that's okay. So now I have numbers sub 4 equals 13. So what that's going to do is it's going to take the value of 13 and it's going to store it inside index 4 of that array. And so that 13 comes in here, it replaces the 0, and it's now 13. What happened to the 0? It's gone. It's thrown away. When we're talking about working with arrays, the previous contents of that spot, when I use that assignment operator right here, the sub 4 equals 13, whatever goes inside that, if I don't do something beforehand and retrieve that value, save that value, do something with that value, it just gets thrown away. It is disposed of. There is no save feature or capture feature attached to using an array unless you do so manually in advance. And so when I put that 13 in there, previous value of 0 is just tossed out. We have no way to keep track of it. We don't even know it was even changed. So you want to make sure that if you're ever making a change to an array, that you automatically track those values. And so again, when we're working with an array, we start off with the fact we have a name right here of the array. It starts off, of course, right there, it would be pointing to null. When I then point at this spot into array 5, it then creates this value set right here, and it fills it all with the default value of that, in this case an int, that are all filled with zeros. And then I can assign a value in that with 13. If I want to go ahead and retrieve a value out of that array, we'll go right below here, and I want to get the spot of the second index right here, so I have int test equals, and then numbers sub 2. And so that number sub 2, I'm going to go look at the second spot right here. I'm going to grab the value of that 0, and I'm going to get a copy of it, of course, because it's a primitive. I'm going to put that inside test. Because when I work with primitives, of course, all I get is a copy on that. And so I don't hurt what's stored in here at all. When I say number sub 2 equals test, I'm going to get a copy of that value, and I have that copy of inside test, and I can do whatever I want to it, and it won't affect what's stored inside the actual array itself. Again, the only way to change what's inside the array is use the assignment operator on the right-hand side of the square brackets, so we can say I'm shoving it into it from the right-hand side into the left. And that's the only way we can change what's inside the contents of our array with a primitive object or primitive value is we use the assignment operator. And so again, we have a quick little demo right here of how we can use an array with primitives and go from there. Stay tuned. All right, we're going to take this a little bit further. We're going to work with DebugDucks this time, aka objects, when we're talking about arrays. And so we've worked with DebugDucks before. They answer your questions. They listen to you really well. You can do all sorts of cool things. And they've got lots of colors that come in. They're great, wonderful tools. So we have a DebugDuck array, and we're going to name it ducks. And of course, I forgot my semicolon. So we have our DebugDuck array ducks, and ducks is a new DebugDuck array of length 3. So we've decided it's going to be a length 3, and when we do that, immediately we have 3 slots in an array that can hold duck-shaped objects, and they're all filled with null. Because when we're talking about an object-based array, like DebugDuck, string, or any other object you want to make, when you create it by default, it's initially filled with simply the default value, which for every object is null. And so I've got 3 nulls in a box. Woohoo! Great thing. Now, I don't usually want to just keep track of null objects. So to do so, I need to actually go ahead and I need to assign a value into a location or an element inside that array. So ducks sub 1 is going to be a new debug duck of magenta color. And look how cute it is. I've got a magenta duck right there. Now, admittedly, it's not as cute as this, but now I have a null value in my first or 0th index. My index 1, I have a debug duck that's magenta, and in index 2, I have a null slot as well, because again, I haven't put anything in there, so I have to actually replace the existing values. If I want to retrieve what's stored inside there, unless I'm asking for sub 1 on here, I'm going to get null. In fact, I'll do that right now. So I have debug duck temp equals ducks sub 2. And so that's going to go over, and inside my ducks array, 0, 1, 2, I'm going to retrieve that value, the null, and I'm going to assign it to the variable temp. Yay, I now have a null pointer. Hooray. My debug name temp is a null pointer. I'm pointing to nothing. This is the most useful tool I have. So let's change this again. Instead of sub 2, let's change it to sub 1. And now I'm pointing to my debug duck, this duck. And if I ask this duck a question, its question count's going to go up and I can actually work with it. So anytime I'm taking things out of an array or working with an array of objects, of course the first thing I want to make sure I check is that the thing I'm talking to is not null. Because when I first create an object array, they're filled with nulls. So before I actually try and call any dot methods on an object inside an array, I want to make sure I'm actually talking to an object and not null. So you want to make sure you're checking your values when you're working with object-based arrays to make sure you're not going to accidentally get a null pointer exception, crash your app, and have sadness, tears. So that's just a quick review of how to use objects. We just talked about how to use primitives as well, and we just talked earlier as well about how the structure of arrays work. Keep working with this and do some more. We'll talk about how we can do conversion between lists and arrays and do even more cool stuff as we go along. Thanks. Cheers. See ya.